What is the greeting?
Hey!
Whoa!
Bienvenidos todos.
Were you making breakfast and then you realized, hey, I got to do the show?
Yeah, it's exactly what I was doing. I was making breakfast at 1 p.m. because I'm fasting. So I'm doing that thing.
You weirdo. Because
Yeah.
you're a weirdo.
I am.
All right. Well, thank you, Weirdo Doug, for joining us.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Everyone to Open Minds. What is Doug reading? The show that makes UFO people mad because we're not talking all about UFOs.
I know, we really do.
But we talk a lot about UFOs, actually. But
I know, but it's just like someone like vegetarians going to KFC and complaining that there's nothing on the menu for them. It's like we're trying to tell you. I mean, like,
I know.
We just want you to mix it up, folks.
There's nothing in the headline that says UFOs, but I guess they're used to that with the Open Minds. But this show's kind of like to have fun and talk about weirder topics because one of the things that people love about my podcast and have over the years is that I'm a total goofball. And so I decided to double your goofball pleasure by bringing on another goofball so we can goof.
Two goofballs for the price of one.
Lots of goofing.
I haven't said that in years, but
yeah. So that's the whole point. So this is my friend Douglas Smythe, and he reads some strange stuff. And so each week we come and talk about this and lots of other things, and it's a lot of fun. And so look at the contrast. I shaved yesterday, and the contrast is so vivid that, you know, the beard and the non-beard, it feels like to me. Usually, at least I have some stubble when we're doing this, it feels like.
Why do you do that intentionally because you feel inadequate, or?
No, I did it yesterday because I had a couple of videos to do, and I just wanted to have the clean shaven look. And luckily, I didn't have any zits, so
good.
That too is good.
That's a win.
Not always the case, but let's see. I've got my UFO Congress hat on because you got to go to ufocongress.com and register.
I got my Journey to Mars mug. So I mean, we try to appease.
That's cool.
You know, yeah. I got this.
Is that the Marshall Space Center?
I think I got this one. The U.S. Space and Rocket Center. So this was in Florida.
Oh, that's in Alabama. Oh, Florida.
Oh wait, no. You're right. I got this one in
Alabama.
I've been to them all. Yeah. Eventually, you know, I tend to forget where I'm getting these things.
I've been to them too. In fact, my favorite
Base Camp, baby.
Oh yeah, Space Camp. But my favorite takeaway from that one is my space. I've got these oven mittens that look like NASA gloves. Those are my favorite because we've had these oven mittens. We used to call them NASA gloves. These big oven mittens that we had. So I actually got some NASA ones that look like NASA.
Oh, no kidding. So NASA kind of put that together also.
Yeah, they did. They are really smart at NASA.
They have some smart people working for them, just a few, but
yeah,
it's not like it's a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, anyways, where is everybody?
No, they're here. They're just not talking yet, but looks like there's people watching. So, a couple of things before we get started into the book. We like to talk about what we've been doing this week. This week, I had a couple of really great interviews. So. This weekend, I interviewed Luis Elizondo for the Rojas Report, so you could watch that. Time. Yeah, what's the big deal with him? Yeah, I keep threatening to do that every week, and he's just been a busy guy, so we've had to postpone him, but we finally got it done. And, you know, this is the guy that ran the Pentagon UFO program.
Right.
In fact, him coming out about this program existing and him running it has inspired this whole huge level of credibility, maybe bigger than ever, that's been brought to the field. And in fact, even the Senate Intelligence Committee is now asking for the military to have a central UFO kind of organization, what they just announced this week that they created, although it has been around for a little while now. It's called the UAP Task Force. So that is a formal organization under the Undersecretary of Defense. The other thing, so Luis Elizondo is the man. So yeah, I interviewed him a lot about all of this stuff going on. Also, I recently wrote an article about how the Pentagon keeps changing their story about UFOs, and they keep saying things like glue didn't work for APIP, this Pentagon program, which is really ridiculous. I've always felt it was ridiculous because I even personally have talked to most of these people. The people who actually work on ATIP are like, yeah, Lou was the guy. Yes, he's the one we report to. Even Senator Harry Reid, who started the program, is like, yes, Elizondo's the guy. So I don't know why they keep doing that. It's weird, dude. I think they're trying to punish him. They're giving him like the Snowden treatment.
Well, that's what happens to whistleblowers.
Exactly. He says he's not a whistleblower, but he kind of is, because it's information. It seems like they didn't want out that he got out. So my other interview, the other interview, well, he says, he kind of thinks of a whistleblower as releasing illegally classified information. But, it's someone who does it for the betterment of society. In other words, exposing a crime or something like that. And that is kind of a definition, but I think loosely he fits into that too, like you said. Yeah. I agree with you. And then I interviewed also this week Adam Kehoe. He's a PhD in information sciences, and he watches policy and defense issues, and has been blogging about UAPs and policy issues, and really intelligent. I think the most important topics to consider, the real meat and potatoes about how this is all working and why, which most UFO people don't really pay attention to. Most are like, tell us about Roswell. Well, that's not really what's going on here so much. And that's what we got into.
No, it is, though. It's true. It's the same stories over and over again. I almost feel like it's like when you're home alone and you turn the TV on just to have something on. There's something comforting about the same information over and over again, lulling you, protecting you. Even though it's freaky, it's still comforting.
Yeah.
I think that's.
I do that. I'll put on HGTV. It's the same thing every time. Same thing when people are looking for houses, a couple's complaining, whatever. Yep. Same thing. Yep. Or I'll put on 90 Day Fiance is kind of my brainless other show that I kind of have in the background. Again, same thing. Same scenarios. But you're right. It's comforting.
Yeah. It's
so
like
what
coast
have
to coast.
You been up to? Yeah, like coast to coast. Well, not so much. That's a little too much for me.
Oh, but it's so comforting for some of us. And just to know,
I know it is for you.
Still there. I just wish Art Bell was still around, but whatever. What have I been up to? Haven't been up to much because it's been really hot here in Arizona. Just been working.
In California too.
Oh man, it's been like record-breaking highs we're hitting here. But
and I'm going
it's kind of breaking.
Weekend,
oh, really?
Like a moron.
Oh, you're coming back here this weekend. I thought you were saying the temperature was.
No.
Oh, you're coming back? Haven't really done anything much out of the house. I do my daily hike every day. I do about 2 miles. But other than that, just been working, doing the soaps, doing the scents, working on future releases. We get the fall coming up, so our eyes are kind of on the calendar for that, and looking at all the fall releases. And we do a bunch of spooky stuff. And I got this new one coming out in the fall called Hotel Cecil. And anyone who follows the paranormal will immediately catch that reference.
I do follow the paranormal, but I don't catch that reference.
Oh man.
Tell us about it.
Lisa Lamb. Do you know the Lisa Lamb case?
No.
Hotel Cecil, where her body was found in the water tower on top of it.
Oh, I do know this story now.
Very
freaky. That is weird.
There's elevator.
I don't know why she was up there.
But there was no way she could really get up there. There was a way she could get up there, but no way she could get herself in there. The camera footage from the elevator with her acting just bizarre, looking out when the elevator door is open and like she's talking to someone and doing these weird hand gestures and going back in there. Clearly it could be someone having an episode of some sort, but spooky nonetheless, considering everything that's transpired in this hotel over the last, 75 years. In fact, I have
more weirdness than just that has happened.
I have some vintage postcards from the Hotel Cecil. Oh yeah. Lots of strange stuff has happened here.
Wow.
And these are great. These are from
So is the scent going to be the scent of a decaying body in water? Is that the scent you're going to go for?
No, actually, what I'm going to go for is I'm going to do an homage or a tribute scent to Burma Shave. Burma Shave is another. So you have this like cool paranormal homage I'm doing to Hotel Cecil, and then you have this homage to a shaving tradition, which is Burma Shave. And some of you may remember the Burma Shave signs on the side of the road. Their whole advertising campaign about 100 years ago was to have almost like roadside attraction signs. One sign at a time would say the first part of the ad, and it typically rhymed like it was typically a rhyme. Like they push you down would be the first sign. And then the second sign would be these shaved dictators. And then the third one would be, but you wear the crown. Screw the haters, or something like that. Burma shave would be the last sign. So yeah, that was the you'll see references of it all the time. Burma shave. It's a classic, and that's what they were known for. Except when they kind of actually went out of popularity when we changed the speeds or turned to highways as opposed to roads because it was too fast to read those signs. So that actually hurt their marketing. But they've been out of business for a long, long time, decades. And I have a few tubes. I collect the vintage stuff. Might have some floating around here, but the scent is just it's iconic and it's historic. And I call this scent archaeology. What I do a lot of times, I'll go back, I'll find very old scents that don't exist anymore, and do what I consider a service to mankind and bring them back, reanimate them, or reboot them, as I like to say. And this is one of them. Yeah. Oh, I see what you did there. But yeah, so combining these two, so the whole advertising campaign I want to do is like signs, spooky signs that you have to read one at a time. Like I have this whole thing in my mind how I want to work it. But yeah, it's fun. And so I'm looking at that. I do another scent called Clown Fruit, which is a spooky clown scent that we've been doing for the last few years, and people freak out over this. And a few more other ones I'm not going to get into now. I'll get into it as we get closer. But yeah, that's what I'm working on really. I have a whiteboard on my wall, and it looks like one of those crazy boards with like the red yarn. Except I use green yarn, and I just put together whole, I try to complete stories or tell stories through our advertising and our labels and so on and so forth. So It's all about doing the research first, and that's what we're doing with Hotel Cecil in the moment.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do something. So yeah, it's hot. And you know what's weird about here is I live by the beach, and the beach cities, a lot of the homes don't have AC. And I'm not even completely sure why, but probably because the temperature is it's a lot cooler by the water. So for instance, there is a heat wave in California, and they're saying, watch out for the heat, except for the beach towns, because we get that cool breeze, but it's still pretty hot. So, and humid. So in here right now, it's probably pushing 80 and pretty humid. And I've turned off the fans.
It's relative, really. I mean,
it is totally relative. So it does feel really hot right now. And I turn off the fans, to do the show. And it starts to get really hot here. But let's reveal to people now the book. Boop, boop, boop.
This week's book, folks. Now, the name can kind of throw you off the trail a little. What this is actually about is the Newport Tower, see? Or the John D. Tower. A Renaissance. Yeah. Herolgium in Newport, Rhode Island. Now, I grew up probably about a half an hour away from this. So this has been something in my life for a long time. We used to refer to it as the Viking Tower, and I'd say 95% of the area still does. And most people refer to it as the Viking Tower or the Newport Tower. However, the author, James Allen Egan, is arguing, no. This goes back even further. This goes back, or not even further. This goes back to Elizabethan era England. And he'll explain why. And it's an amazing. So, I mean, this is a textbook of information. It really is. And I got this. Actually, I wonder if I got him to sign it. Yeah. I got this from him. You know what I mean? Like, he's got his drawings in it and whatnot, but I got this from him on the scene, right across the tower from the tower, because I was visiting there not too long ago, a couple of years back. And I wanted to pick up some literature on it to explore it a little bit more when I got home. And I went into the Tower Museum, and it's not what you think it is. It's actually his museum. He owns it. And so it's all about his theories on what it actually is. In fact, when I came in the door, he was like, so who do you think did it? The Templars, the Vikings? And just a barrage. I was like, look, man, I just want a book on the history of what we know about it.
Right off the bat, he asked you that?
Yeah. So I knew I was in for a ride. And I mean,
were you wearing your pit hat?
I wasn't. Wrong time of year. I know I was. It's odd that I wasn't, because I typically am, but I was not wearing the pit hat. But
the reason I ask is maybe he thought you were an explorer if you were wearing the hat, but somehow you have the air, I guess, of an explorer. So he thought perhaps you were a fellow expert, perhaps.
Maybe there's that. But I mean, what he ended up doing is almost holding my hand around the entire museum, and each one is a station where is where he does his lecture. He has like the pull down, like shade, like maps and drawings and illustrations. He'll pull them down. He has a laser pointer and he moves all around the museum.
Wow.
Not skipping a beat. I mean, this guy just get this on-running lecture. I was actually there with my brother too, who's a professor. So even when he left, he was like, "That was an amazing lecture." He's like, "I don't even know how you would do that." And he's just been doing it every day to everyone that walks in there. I can't imagine this place being hugely popular. But evidently,
that's pretty fun.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
And you're probably the type of person like me that would be fun. You would like to be that guy. To have your museum on a topic you love and walk people around and talk about it.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, because I have that same passion when it comes to my shop. When people come in, I want to show them around my shop and whatnot. It was like that, and we were bouncing off each other. He was I won't say impressed, but he was excited that I knew a little bit about what he was talking about, which is John Dee, and that's who he's saying built this tower.
John Dee.
Yes, John Dee, he gets a bad rap nowadays because
oh man, that guy. I was just reading an article about him today, and
I bet
something to do with Russia and the campaign or something like that.
That's a different John Dee. But John Dee,
I don't know who John Dee is actually.
He was pretty much the Queen's philosopher and mathematician, and but towards the end of his life, he started looking into angel magic. But he was just a Renaissance man when it came to that. The angel magic was just something else for him to explore towards the end. I mean, what we're talking about today is about John Dee pre 1583, before 1583. After that, he meets Edward Kelly, and they start looking into Ed Kelly channeling or talking
weird
to angels, and just weird stuff, but stuff of the time. And but the guy was, he was a philosopher, he was a mathematician, he was an astrologer, he was an alchemist, which was perfectly fine back then. He created some of the most amazing maps, and early guidance systems and navigation for ships back then. So it's not that odd that he would be involved with this. However, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to this tower because it was built so early. And the reason why, and this is another great thing about John Dee, is he was so well respected in that court. He wrote a book, and in his book, he's explaining pretty much the book he wrote to Queen Elizabeth. He may have been in love with her. Everyone was at the time, but he mentions, England at the time only had probably about 25 ships, if that. They need to build up their ships because the Spanish had hundreds at this point, and he saw the world as something that England should dominate. The British Empire, that the term British Empire, he coined that term in this book, and he also so he's saying we need to build up ships, build 80 ships, X amount of men to man these ships. One of the first places we need to look at is North America. And so that is where this is. I mean, all this is legit history too. You can dig this up. So that is pointing to North America there. The whole problem with it is it needed to be deeded, and in order to you would know this, in order to keep the deed or keep the deed legitimate, something needed to be built in North America. Now, this author discovers that the whole bay back in earlier maps was called John Dee Bay. And now you have to really dig to find this. But when he found it, he's like, this is what drew him to this, studying this. He was like, why is this area called John Dee Bay? What does John Dee have to do with any of this? This is in 1583. I mean, England wasn't doing anything over here at that time. Well, they were trying to get over here and trying to legitimize their claim to North America. And in order to do this, they needed to build something there. He thinks that this tower was what they built to claim that. And if you look at this tower, it's more than just a tower. It's more than just a residence too. I mean, it is a mathematical cosmological calendar aligned to the sun, the moon. A lot of these classical buildings were during the Renaissance period, but in the United States. And then where the confusion comes in is eventually, so settlers here ended up going more south because longer growing seasons. So this tower was forgotten all about until the 1600s. It doesn't show back up in history until the 1600s. Actually, it doesn't show up in history until the 1600s. And the governor The then governor, in his will, mentions it as his, what is he? His windmill. Something about his stone windmill is in his will. And the thing is, stone windmills weren't built like, or stone windmills just weren't built. But windmills in general, they're usually wooden, but weren't built in this particular style anyways. If you look at this building, can you put up one of those pictures?
Yeah. So Doug sent me some pictures. There we go. There's one.
Yeah, this is actually the viney period is when this is called. This is when they were allowed to grow vines on the tower. And so you can already see it's in not necessarily disrepair, but it's an ancient structure or an old structure.
Want to see that one?
There it is again. So it's right on the bay. It's in the perfect area, panoramic view. And I don't have any interior photos of it, but clearly not a windmill. A windmill would be tapered at the top. It would have it would have a shaft down the middle to two grinding stones that would be on the base. You wouldn't have these arches open to the wind if you're grinding flour, Another thing that makes it stand apart from a windmill is on the second floor, beams would be running right across those arches to create a second floor. On the second floor, there's a space for, there I am. You can kind of see it better on the inside. There we go. On the second floor, right above the arches, there would be beams there holding up the floor. There's a fireplace up there. You would never, ever in a million years have a fireplace inside a windmill because flour is more explosive or flammable than gunpowder. So there's a lot of things in it that just tell us that it's not a windmill and it's something else. But if you look at the stonework too, it's very Renaissance European. And not only that, is the walls are 2 feet thick. It's 28 feet tall. It goes down to I can't remember how many feet down into the ground it goes, but it goes to the bedrock. So it was clearly built to last, and all those windows and whatnot are aligned with different positions of the sun and the moon, or will align with them on different points of the year. And so it's just bizarre.
Here you can see the windows.
Yes, and they're in strange places and locations. They're also themselves are tapered on the inside, so you can it catches different parts of. Let's see, can you see it? Scroll down. There you go. See how they're angular on the inside, so it can catch different angles of the sun. And not only that, what the author discovered is it's also a camera obscura. Which camera obscura is Latin for dark room, and it kind of operates on the same principle. In fact, it operates on the same exact principles as a pinhole camera. So in one of those windows, there would be a board with a pinhole in it, not necessarily a pinhole, a hole of about, I don't know, an aperture of maybe 2 inches, 3. I don't remember the exact diameter. However, on a sunny day, that would project an image of the bay into. This is how camera obscura operated. In fact, there's a lot of them around Europe, old ancient camera obscura buildings that had a small hole in it, aperture, that would allow an image from the outside in, and it would project on the opposite wall and upside down, kind of like our eye. And so what would happen there is it would be projected. And in that fireplace on the solstice, on March 21st, the ocean actually is projected right in dead center of the summer. And if you've ever seen the ocean through a camera obscura, it's like fiery water. It like flickers. It looks really cool. And the authors discovered that on this day,
camera obscura,
it actually, the fire water is on the solstice, is right in the fireplace, and it flickers. It looks really magical. So someone put a lot of thought into this design, and no one around at that time would have been capable of this except for John Dee, is what he, speculates, being into what John Dee was into and being who John Dee was. Okay, I'm looking at the questions now, or the comments.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to show a camera obscura just because it sounds like you're making it up, but you're not.
No, I'm not. In fact, a lot of Renaissance artists use them too. They would use them to sketch or to trace.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, there you go.
That's so interesting. I'd never heard of that. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Same principle as a pinhole camera. So you have elements of that within this tower too. It's clearly not a Viking tower is what it all comes down to. So if you're from New England and you've been hearing this your entire life, it's not true.
And so because that's one of the things that people thought. So how strong, is the origins? Like, how certain are you that it was John Dee? I mean, is it pretty well documented?
No, it's not really well documented at all. He's the first one to really. Well, actually, there was a professor at University of Rhode Island, William Penhouse. He was professor of physics and astronomy, and he was the one who pointed out the astronomical alignments first. It's this author, James Egan, that ties it back to John Dee from his research. And I mean, then there's a lot of information. I mean, he backs up all of it. It clearly wasn't the Vikings in 1150, just the building style alone. And then when you tie in all the astronomical elements, it's not. It doesn't seem like a Viking building.
Yeah.
Templars. You've seen some shows, I'm sure, on the Templars building this tower too. I know Scott. What's his name?
Jones.
No, he has a show. The show on. He looks at ancient rocks all around the country. He got one on this Templar bend for a while. He thinks Templars were here in 500 years ago. Scott Walter. Anyways, doesn't matter. But okay, so there's Templars. There's people that claim that the Templars built it in 1398. There's even the Chinese get some credit too. Chinese built a pagoda lighthouse in 1421, and then finally the Portuguese. But the more you dig into this book, the more it points to, or it looks like. I mean, I understand you can frame anything the way you want to, but I mean, it makes a pretty good case that this is something built by John Dee. And John Dee really was almost like the Leonardo da Vinci of his time.
So Dirk, I'm always impressed that Dirk has so much for a guy whose nickname is Dirk Bone Steel, which is kind of goofy, which of course is kind of our thing. But he always has a wealth of knowledge on all of these topics. And in fact, here he's saying Vikings never built a tower anyplace. That wasn't their thing.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And when they did build stuff, I mean, it was like long houses and wood and whatnot. The thing is, if you were here back then, as the Portuguese, for an example, so I can't remember the sailor, but he was supposedly shipwrecked here. And so he gets credit for possibly building this tower. It's like, when you're shipwrecked, you don't have tools. You have Native Americans running all around. Like, I mean, you don't have time to stop and build something like this. And even the time of John Dee, like, I mean, they came prepared to do this. They came with plans by John Dee, who was also an architect, also studied architectural design as well. So, I mean, like, it really does lend some, I don't know. It really does look like someone of John Dee's stature put some time and energy into designing this and for possible land claims, but then was forgotten about. But someone put a lot of time and energy into this.
Interesting. So, so is it, now where exactly is it?
It's in Newport, Rhode Island, in Toro Park.
Uh-huh. And
it was actually privately owned for a long time. I think it was gifted to Newport around 1855 by a couple families.
So is it a controversial kind of topic there?
Well, I mean, yeah, amongst the people in the paranormal crowd and so on and so forth. But the locals, again, just call it the Viking Tower.
And do you think they believe that it was made by the Vikings?
I don't think they give it too much thought. A lot of the locals, yeah. I think it's just something that's always been there. But I always was intrigued by it, and I did for a while think it was. I was looking at something Viking, when I was a kid growing up. But the more I learned and studied, I mean, if you look at architecture from that time in Europe, you see a lot of similarities in what's going on here, especially those arches, just the building techniques. So, it wasn't Viking, it wasn't Native American. I mean, it's something else is going on here. And that's amazing to me that this hasn't been solved yet. So his dive into this, and he's got 5 books now, all loosely related to this, that really take a deep dive into this. And it's just no one else is picking up on this.
And why do the paranormal people, what is their interest?
I think when you talk about astronomical alignments, it gets a little, there's like a woo-woo element to it. Some witchy poo aspects. Yeah, which I think is really cool. I mean, that's one of the things I really enjoy and dig about, ancient monolithic sites or ancient buildings. Like, it makes me wonder to this day in modern buildings, are they putting astronomical alignments in there as well? I think that would be something interesting to explore. But so you see that come up time and time again all throughout history, and I think that's really neat. And if you were going to be doing a land claim here, you would want to build a calendar. Especially if you're new to the area, new to the land, new to the environment and climate, you want to build some type of calendar for the farmers that you would expect to come up after the fact. So first thing you do when you move, claim land, build a building. Second thing, build some type of calendar so you know when to plant the crops, when to harvest, so on and so forth. So it does seem like that's what England would be doing.
I think that's a really good point. Because, a lot of ancient ruins have, like you've said, even Native Americans or whoever, they align with the stars. And people, even the pyramids, and certain people, ancient alien theorists, subscribe to, that must have been where the aliens came from, that they want to go visit, or the aliens that made it, that sort of thing. But like you're saying, all of these people lived and died by their crops and planting. And so they needed these calendars to show them what time of year it was and when they had to harvest or plant or all of those things. And that's why we see these all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what's going on here. And so it just makes sense to me that this is what England would build to kill two birds with one stone. Win the deed and over Spain, and offer something for the farmers when they eventually would make their way over here. So I think it was just
right. And that's a good point too. It serves as a tool. It's you would want to be in the area because you've got this tool, you've got this natural mapping tool to help you with knowing what time of the year it was and everything.
Well, it's a selling point too, to get people over here. Like, look, we got it all figured out. We got this calendar. I mean, and he built it off of the Mona symbol. This right here. John Dees was big into this, just different alchemical symbols, but this one was showing balance and whatnot between the moon, sun, elements, Aries sign. He combined it all here and had that. He used that as a guiding principle in the design of that tower. And he goes, many chapters pointing this out in this book. It's pretty cool, actually, how much he breaks down here, but it's a lot like a textbook. It really is.
Well, and to support your theory, and some people are making comments like Dirk and, oh no, I thought it was a conversation, but it's just Dirk mentioning things, but he's got a lot of good points, and same with your points, is it's got European influence in the arches. But he's saying, it's not like it's something that was built by necessarily a mason or something, in that we'll go into the other picture, just because, if you look here, it's not as clean as a lot of, what we're used to in the European structures of that time. I mean,
I can show you some examples.
Mm-hmm.
He has some examples in comparison. But not only that, that day I was there, I was not only with my brother, I was also with my mother's boyfriend, who is a mason, or was a mason. He's a retired mason. So I had him looking at it with me too.
I guess just to say, this guy, it makes sense. It's not someone who was like building stuff all the time.
Yeah, that had to be built by a team. And they're using what rock is available at the time. And if you're new to the land, you're not quarrying, you're not going to the quarry anyways. You're building your own, or using river rocks. And if you look at a lot of those rocks, a lot of them are weird colors and whatnot. You're working with what you have there, is what it all comes down to. They did not bring the rock with them. So, and again, Native Americans are all around there. Someone's had to be keeping guard while this is going on. This is not an easy project at all. So it's not like what you would see in Europe in some place that's settled and whatnot. So in defense of what we're seeing here, but he has photos of other stuff that it looks very much like during those times, and I can't seem to find them right now. But yes, and he's showing up at winter solstice, summer solstice. He's photos of this all throughout the year.
Oh, someone from Finland coming in here. Speaking of Viking country.
There we go.
We do have some other people. Someone said hello from Las Vegas.
Viva
Las Vegas. Yeah,
another interesting thing about it is, I don't know if you can see this.
Let's see.
That's the fireplace on the second floor. See the fireplace?
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, so the beams will be right below that. But not only that, what he has outlined in there are the two flues, which is not typical for a fireplace. It usually be one. He has two. That's because those windows are getting in the way. Look at how close that one window is.
Yeah.
To the side of it. And so it's like they don't make sense unless, and that's what made them start thinking about planetary or solar alignments, was like those windows are doing something else. Let's see.
So it is a really cool structure. It's something different. It's something you don't see around. I mean, I haven't seen a building like that myself. So I could see how it would inspire, mystery and conjecture, and it's fun.
Yeah, it is. It's got a lot of history to it. The British soldiers actually were storing, gunpowder and weaponry in there during the Revolutionary War. And when they were getting chased out of Newport, they blew it up. They blew up all their ammo and whatnot in that tower, and it blew the top off the place. There was a top on there at one time. Blew it right off. But the building is built so well. Yeah. It stayed together.
Wow.
And it also looks like, so, I mean, this is what, let me see if I can find a picture of it. It would have been, and now you pointed out the arches and whatnot. So what we're confusing here is like that it always looked like that. But what he argues is it was covered in plaster, and there was a whole Italian. There's not, like, so we're looking at the skeletal remains, but there's an Italian technique. I can't remember it, but where it's plaster, and some parts of the building, like on one of the columns, you can still see plaster. Not on any of those that I'm standing in front of, but so there's that too to take into consideration.
That makes sense.
But yeah, covered in plaster. It had a roof. The author argues, it's 28 feet tall here, but he argues that it was even taller when the roof was in place and whatnot. No, it's not fresco. Fresco's more of a painting technique. This is I can't think of the name off the top of my head.
Like plastering adobe type of thing.
It was, covered in plaster. It was probably painted. And, just imagine being one of the Native Americans watching all this go down too and checking it out after the fact. But yeah, super cool design. Really just a mysterious place. I wish we had the history for it, and it's shocking that we don't. And a lot of, we think why we're not taught really, or why people didn't pay more attention to it back in the day is the governor actually that mentions this in his will.
Stucco.
His name was Benedict Arnold. So
really,
yeah, but not the Benedict Arnold. I think he was the great grandfather of Benedict Arnold. He was a relative. So we don't pay attention to anything Benedict Arnold, and we don't pay attention to anything John Dee anymore, because John Dee a lot of times is remembered, as I mentioned earlier, as into angel magic or talking to angels and so on and so forth, where this is pre that part of John Dee. So it's kind of unfair in that regard. But yeah, so we don't touch anything Benedict Arnold in this country or John Dee, it seems. So we think he thinks that's another reason why no one really just, kept track of these things.
I see. So we also have someone from New Orleans, and you can tell there's a musical that goes on in my head. So every time I see some of these names, I think of a song. Every time I see New Orleans, it makes me think of, baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go down to New Orleans. I love you so. Baby, please don't go.
It's not bad. I need to accompany you on the harmonica sometimes.
And then we got San Francisco in here. It looks like, Renee is talking about San Francisco extraterrestrial UFO, Muir Woods National Park. Bigfoot was tossed out of a UFO in 1978, he's claiming. Interesting.
Oh, I've not heard that. I'm trying to think of it. No, it's not stucco either. But yeah, see, he claims there was a dome on it also. And
that got blew off.
Yeah, that got blown up. I think it was actually gone even before the British were there, but there was some other type of roof that was on there at the time. And if you notice, so there's that symbol, and then this is him superimposing it over the shape of the tower, or what it could have looked like, or possibly looked like. But yes, he really gets into this design. I wish I could find that name for that plastering. Anyways, there's very little out there about this author, but he did do a TED Talk, I noticed. Newport TED Talk. And
really?
Yeah, if you search Elizabethan America, John Dee, TED Talk, or James Allen Egan, you will find it. And I think it's probably about a half an hour long. He starts off really strong, but I don't think they gave him enough time to really fill in all the blanks. But it's an interesting TED Talk. And if you watch that TED Talk, you'll get a little understanding of what I went through one-on-one with him in the museum. He's pretty kinetic, this guy. Yeah, I can't find the name of that technique. But yes, an amazing book, an amazing topic, and I highly recommend people dig into it, and especially John Dee as well. John Dee is an amazing person of history, and that we owe a lot to. And the fact that, again, British Empire, the fact that we're speaking English now in this country might have a lot to do with John Dee. And this is another book, Empire of Angels, that came out probably about a year ago by Jason Louv. And we'll get into this on another episode, but John Dee, highly, very, very fascinating. And it's highly probable after reading this book, this could be of his design. And at least the fact that it's built there. In making claim.
And when you say, us speaking English, to John Dee, in that he helped inspire the English to
build empire,
populate the area, to build the empire, or else it might have been the French or the Italian that
or the Spanish
taken over in the Native America, or the Spanish, right?
Or Portuguese. It could have been anybody really. And so he really got Queen Elizabeth building ships and looking at the world differently. I'm sorry, I have some notes here. I'm trying to go.
Yeah, someone's saying Venetian plaster. I looked it up. I found Marmorino, Veneziano.
It's something else. He'll mention it in that TED Talk. I can't think of it off the top of my head. It is Italian. It's an Italian technique. He mentions it in that TED Talk. I should have written it down. But the fact is, it's not that truly that important. I was just talking about in regards to the arches not looking perfectly or it not looking perfect. We're not seeing it's like the pyramids of today. We're not seeing them how they were. We're seeing them how they are now, which is typically skeletal remains of what it once was. Mm-hmm. And
so with this book, what is it with the book that really catches you? Is it the research?
It's the amount of research, yeah, and the passion that goes into this. I bought this immediately after his lecture. His lecture with me was, I don't know, it was probably like a half an hour long, 45 minutes long, and really just to have that one-on-one with the guy who wrote the book, before I even knew he wrote the book, but with this guy was amazing. I could ask anything I wanted to. He would break it down right then and there. And then before I left, I was like, well, do you have a book? He's like, oh yeah, I got books. And, $45 later, I don't know how much I paid for this, but again, it's like a textbook. It really is like a textbook. I left with this, and I was visiting, this is way after I lived there anymore. So I had something to read the rest of the time when I was back at the hotel, really. And I wasn't looking for something like this. This is typically what I look for when I travel. I was just looking for some history on the area. That's what I'll do. If I go to a monument or something like that, I'll pick up the history and try to put the pieces together and just make my own speculations. This guy did all the work for me, and really just went somewhere I was not expecting to go that day. I was really just looking at it as the old Viking Tower, and I was pleasantly surprised with the tour. If you ever can get to Newport, Rhode Island, folks, do yourself a favor and check out what I'm going to call the John Dee Tower in Toro Park. it really will leave an impression on you. It definitely did on me.
I think that we both share an interest in information, and that's because I feel like this too, and that's just why I love this sort of thing. I love it when people take it upon themselves to research something historical or ruins or something in the area no one else has, to kind of figure it out. And yeah, that gets me really excited too. So I can understand you're being excited by this guy doing that work and discovering something as interesting as this.
Yeah, it was really cool. And, and it was great to have my brother there too, because he could see me in action bouncing off it. And he's looking at me like, how do you know this stuff? Like, because my brother's a straight shooter, he's a physicist, I mean, like, this is what he's always had his head in the books himself, but just he doesn't delve too deeply into this stuff like I do. So he's just looking at us the entire time, bouncing off of each other. And it was just cool. And then having my mother's boyfriend there too, the Mason. So this guy didn't know who walked in. He's like, okay, you're a physics professor. You're a Mason. And, and who's this guy? And here I am, like, doing a dance with him. So I think he was also excited too, to have this audience. And, it was very interesting. So yeah, if you can, check it out. And that's the place you can buy the book. Granted, you can find the book online too on Amazon. But if you're nearby, if you're somewhere in New England, I highly recommend going there to pick up the book, because then you'll get the tour as well. And you can really just like pick this guy's brain. And it's an amazing experience.
I want to share another picture because I was not aware of this technique. I am aware that this is how cameras work. I mean, essentially, you can make your own camera with a little box by poking a hole in it.
Pinhole camera.
Yeah, and in physics, we when I was a physics student, we did a lot with poking holes and measuring light and those sort of things. But yeah, this is just so fascinating to me that they would do this. And you see this image here where they bounced it off a mirror, apparently, so they could take. That's so incredible.
Yeah, there were a lot of Renaissance artists that only now we discover is part of their technique, their drawing and painting was using this. So they're just tracing what's being projected. And by doing so, not only are they coming out more realistic, but they're also learning from this too. So it was a great learning technique to learn shadow and light and so on and so forth. Like, yeah, camera obscura was pretty big. Even Da Vinci was toying around with camera obscuras back in the day. In fact, they think the Shroud of Turin, there's some people that thought this anyways, was actually the world's first photograph done by Leonardo da Vinci using camera obscura technology and light sensitive chemicals that were available to him at the time. And that the head on the body of the Shroud of Turin was actually his, which is like the biggest joke to the Catholic Church because he was such a heretic. And so, but it was a decapitated body that he supposedly used, but that's his head on top of it, him posing behind it. And we can, look back at art history, and the earliest pictures or paintings or renditions of Christ we have come after the Shroud of Turin. So it's almost like they were basing their observations or their ideas of Christ off of what they saw on the Shroud of Turin, which could have been Leonardo da Vinci. So it would have been a big joke. Yeah. No, there you go. There's a projection.
Yeah. So this is one of those alleged projections, and
right
look at that. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And they get even crisper than that. Typically they would pull down a screen, or they would put a screen or a cloth linen over the wall, pull it taut, so you would have a really clear image to work with.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is really cool. I think it's really interesting. And it's fun to kind of understand it. So are there people who debate his ideas?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Even on that episode of that Templar, what is it? Templars in America. There's some show that was on the History Channel, and it was Scott Walter, I think his name is. He's the forensic geologist, I think he calls himself. And I've never heard of that before until I saw his show. But where he goes back and looks at the age of stones and so on and so forth, and tries to, make an educated guess on who could be behind it. And he's big on Templars, trying to prove they were here in the United States. And I don't argue for that or against that. That's just another one of these theories. But so James Egan is on the show, the episode where Scott's at this tower, and he kind of gets his theory in there for a second, and Scott mentions it, but then he goes, no, it's the Templars, and then they go back to it. But I mean, like, he kind of got in there for a second because he was showing him around this, but Scott has Templars on the mind, so that's where the show was headed, obviously, of course. But yeah, so it is, you know, people have a hard enough time trying to wrap their mind around Templars. Never mind throwing John Dee at them now, but I see better evidence in this book and in this theory than I do with Templars. And I've been to a lot of Templar sites and stuff, and we can talk about that in the future too. But this one, I don't get Templar out of this at all. I really think that this was a land claim by Elizabethan England. That's where I'm at right now. Jury's still out, but this is very, very convincing and compelling.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, when he does talk about evidence, does he have any like documentation that supports that, or anything that John Dee himself wrote or said around it?
About what? About
this tower?
Yeah. Yes. Well, no, not necessarily about the tower. It's you can see that this area is deeded to. John Dee is on it, on the deed, and everything about how to claim the land and whatnot is in John Dee's pen. I mean, it's something that it's all there, but this tower, but the tower wouldn't need to be there in the writings. It's saying we need to do this. We need to have a building built to claim this, to make it legitimate. All this. Oh, that is in the history. That's all there, but there is no mention of this tower really until the 1600s with Benedict Arnold claiming it to be his windmill, and it's clearly that for sure and for certain we can say was not a windmill.
So Dirk is bringing up that there would have definitely been a wooden fort around it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's tough to say now.
Yeah,
like
Dirk,
a barricade you talk about?
That?
There was probably a barricade. I mean, maybe. I mean, there were Native Americans here that in order to build something that long and that intensive, you need to protect the people that are building it. So there would have been a force in place. So maybe a wooden barricade to protect that area. I don't know, unless they were peaceful Native American. Wampanoags, I believe, were in that part. But I mean, this is early. This is like prehistory stuff. So I mean, it's not recorded. We don't know exactly what went on. But yeah, you would have to protect the Masons building this. But I mean, those were. I'm not going to. I saw someone saying that it wasn't stoneworkers. There was definitely stoneworkers involved. You have to know something about building to do something like this so precise to align it the way it is. There was intelligence behind this design. It wasn't just sailors building something. It wasn't castaways building something. So not only was this protected during the building, there were people that knew what they were doing.
Well, and for it to last so long, even to survive, an explosion, and to
Built
be
to
seemingly so sturdy, you would think that they would have to know what they're doing.
Yeah, it was really built to last. It's an amazing structure, and it really is. I wish I sent you some more photos that I took, but if you can get up in there and look inside, and you can actually, some points of the year, get guided tours on the inside. That gate around it is typically in place, but there is a doorway in. It's locked though, but you can, if you book ahead, get tours on the inside, or you could at least when I was there. So it's really is fascinating. There is another rock in there. I can't remember. It's somewhere in the wall that is like a totally different color than everything else. So that might have been another alignment point. I just find it fascinating that on March 21st, the fiery water is projected into the fireplace. And, what's interesting about that is March is that's a fire sign. So you got Aries and you got Pisces also happening around that same time of year. So you got the fire sign, and then you got Pisces, which is the water sign, and you get this fiery water in the fireplace. So again, it's really just like a lot of thought went into this. There's definitely intelligence behind this building.
Well, I don't think that's in doubt. Dirk, why are you saying there definitely had to be a fort around there? I don't know that we need a fort to necessarily prove anything, in that there are deeds that show people owned the land. But are you just saying, maybe you're saying, Dirk, that in order to have a colony or any kind of community of people, you would need a fort? Renee says that History Channel special you were talking about also showed images of ley lines creating pentagram images on the ground in Ireland, Scotland, and England, done by Crusader knights.
Yeah, I mean, ley lines,
about
all cathedrals and, you know, holy buildings or temples, even temples dating back further than that, are historically on ley lines or bloodlines or so on and so forth.
Look, I found
so
something.
yeah, this easily could be too. I'm sure if you could take a map and draw. The thing with ley lines is you can typically track. Yeah. Oh, there's a statue. It's not to John D. Yeah, look at that. But
all right, very interesting.
Yeah, this wasn't a colony though, Dirk. This was like they were showing up. There were 2 ships, or 5 ships rather. No, actually, I think there was 2 ships with 80 men in about 1582 that set out over here. That we think that they were the men on board were responsible for this. So, but they weren't here to colonize. They were just here to make a land claim, and then get back to England. The problem with looking for post holes or signs of old forts is so much time has passed, and Newport, the town of Newport, is built up around this now. In fact, some of those alignment points won't work anymore because there's buildings in the way that block the sun now.
And now people get to see what you look like without your 5th helmet.
Actually, I look even weirder than that now because I've kind of let my hair grow out in these COVID times.
I can tell. Let's get back to your image here. Let's zoom in on you. And you can see the curls poking out from under the hat there.
Yeah, it's getting pretty bad.
All right. I guess any questions before we take off, ladies and gentlemen? I think we've talked. Yeah, very interesting. So especially for people who live in the area, you know, and are curious about the history of that building.
Just the connection alone between Elizabethan England and United States going back that far. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, if that is the case here.
And it's a bit steampunky in that it is technology that's being exhibited in the building. Exactly.
That's proof that some thought went into this, that this is not that the Vikings didn't think like that, but I mean, it's just that they weren't doing this. So I highly recommend this book, folks, or any book by James Allen Egan. Again, he has that TED Talk, Newport TED Talk. I think it's titled Elizabethan America. If you use Elizabethan America and John D. Tower in your search, as well as his name, James Allen Egan, you'll see it. Really frenetic in his delivery, but it's there. And I think there's a podcast or 2 where he's on as well. But really, just an interesting read. And actually, I just found these 2. So these are the little cards that he had in the book. And so the Newport Tower Museum is what he owns and operates. There's his information right there too, if you want to talk to him directly. But also, this is the show that I was talking about. America's Oldest Secret, I think is what it's called, the special. And so he's on that for a hot minute. It's on the History Channel, but he evidently wanted me to check that out too, even though I don't think that he got his fair shake at the topic. But he's on that. So fascinating topic, fascinating book. Thank you. There is a question. Oh,
with whom and how was the tower dated?
Well, it's not. I mean, it's tough to date the tower. We're going by the architecture used, kind of, but it looks to be like around 1580s, 1583, especially, sometime around the 1580s. But it's the designs that they're using to date them with the Renaissance designs. Renaissance, began in the 1400s and slowly made its way across Europe. So there's that, but there's not an exact date. And that's what makes it so mysterious and why this is such a controversial topic. Usually you'll hear, again, credit it to the Templars, but this is a whole different argument. I think it has a little more, a little more to back it up than anything Templar. that I've seen so far. And yeah, that's this week's book, folks. Elizabeth in America. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, great. Thank you very much. Of course, tomorrow on this same channel, Open Minds TV, we've got the radio show, Open Minds UFO Radio, the newscast that we'll be doing tomorrow, talking about UFO news. So subscribe down there and hit the little bell so you're alerted when that happens. If you're watching on YouTube, because we're also broadcasting on Facebook, so just watch the Facebook. But otherwise, Doug, will your new product be out before next week?
Actually, I will have a new product out on this weekend. I think Saturday. If I ever finish this show and get back to putting my sales pages together, but yeah, either we do or don't. We still have over 70 cents, folks. And again, all of our themes are pretty much paranormal or space related because this is our passion. And you can find any and all of them at phoenixshaving.com. And if you're interested in learning how to traditional wet shave with a lot of history and goofiness, check out our show, I'd lather be shaving.com. I'd lather be shaving.com. It's like Wayne's World meets one of those, like, I don't know, antique shows on crack.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Until next time, I will see you later.
Ciao.